Humanity for thousands of years now have ultimately become the apex predator down on Earth. Despite our physical limitations, we are the most intelligent species and have opposable thumbs that allow us to create and use tools for our hunting and defending of other deadly predators. Despite being far less superior in strength compared to other creatures such as bears, crocodiles, rhinos, etc., we have the tools to take them out in a battle, allowing us to venture the world without any real worries anymore, to some extent anyway. However, what if something were to come along that was incredibly fast, had armor plating on it that could take bullet after bullet and not slow down, and getting close to it, regardless of what weapon you might have, would most likely see your corpse scatter all over the ground? Well, in the Fallout universe, this is exactly what was created. An absolutely giant reptilian creature that had one job, and that was to be the ultimate weapon in war. Something that could replace soldiers and would not need to be kitted out in weapons and munitions. It itself was the weapon. This of course would be the Deathclaw, and by the 23rd century, they now roam the world free from their labs and their captivity and are desperate to kill anything in their way if it so much as looks badly in their direction. But are they only killing machines, or have they evolved to anything more than that? Well, in today's episode, we will be looking into the lore behind these mammoth dinosaur-like creatures and fan-favourite creatures, and explore what happened to them before the Great War and after it, and how they found themselves roaming the wasteland. This is the lore behind the new apex predator of the Fallout universe. This is the Deathclaw. The era was the 2070s and the world was in an extremely bad place. Energy was becoming a real problem across the world and the US was hoarding a lot of it for themselves. As a result, war was kicking off between them and China that would come to a boiling point in the year of 2077. However, so many soldiers were being sent out to fight in these barbaric wars, thousands would die, and those that didn't went home suffering massively from the effects of it all. American exceptionalism was the go-to mindset during this time. Basically, America was the best, their aesthetics were the only one to live by, and so on. However, with so many dying and the war getting more intense and no solution being clear about the energy crisis, that view was starting to dwindle a little bit in some cities. The US government, and maybe the shady members inside of it over at the Enclave, knew they needed a solution to this endless slaughter of American troops and sought out a new type of warrior that they could use in battles, one that could cut down their costs massively, and a soldier that could be used for heavy-duty combat operations, capable of total destruction of facilities and carrying heavy payloads if need be. Previous experiments had been made before the height of the war thanks to a new creation of the FEV, the Force Evolutionary Virus, but a lot of these experiments were unsuccessful and could not be used the way they wanted. After that though, the Deathclaw was designed and the scientific experiments would begin, where the scientists would try everything to genetically engineer this new type of warrior. The perfect creature was found during this, that being the chameleons from Out Within Jackson. Utilizing these creatures, the scientists would biologically engineer them into these massive beasts, and ultimately, it was extremely successful, but it was a little too successful, as it quickly became apparent that these new Deathclaw creatures were actually far smarter and far more capable of doing things for themselves than they actually wanted. The Deathclaws weren't dependent on anyone. They were survivalists, capable of hunting and killing for food, and didn't really need any help to survive regardless of what environment they were in. Monitoring the capabilities of these Deathclaws, it would become clear that they were incredibly intelligent compared to other predators on the planet. The Deathclaw was said to have the intelligence of an 8-year-old human and could solve puzzles, think ahead of its prey, and learn from every single situation, helping it adapt in combat scenarios. This made them too deadly to be left without any form of supervision, and whilst it is unknown if they were actually used within combat, it's more than likely it was too great a risk to release them into the world. These predators were just far too intelligent and capable on their own to actually listen to their creators. But before they could even think about what the right thing to do was, do they release them or not, the Great War of 2077 kicked off and all of the nuclear bombs fell on American soil, wiping out any and all survivors left on the surface who were in target areas, such as cities and military strongholds. For a good while, the Deathclaws remained within their containment, but as time went on and their need to hunt and explore grew, they would eventually break out on their own and would flee out into the wilderness of the post-apocalyptic wasteland. But this brought about a new problem for the wasteland survivors. These new horrific and terrifying creatures were still capable of reproducing, and with them now free to go where they want and set up where they wanted, they were able to breed and increase their numbers dramatically. Unlike the chameleons they had been engineered from, the Deathclaws would be able to birth new ones through eggs that they would lay in clusters. But not only that, these eggs were all made thanks to the strongest Deathclaw in their society. Every single one was helped thanks to the alphas, meaning that all of the new baby Deathclaws being born into the world would share those genetics and would ultimately turn into more of those alphas. The genetic pool would essentially get stronger each time, or at least would most likely be at the same level as these alphas anyway, which is still absolutely terrifying. These eggs weren't exactly easy to get rid of either. Even if you did find your way into a pack of Deathclaws and found their birthing area, every single egg would weigh up to 5.5 kilograms, and on top of that, had an incredibly tough exterior, making them difficult to destroy. And if you wanted to just store it away to just let it die on its own or something like that, good luck with that, because the eggs would also have an extremely long shelf life, meaning they could survive in almost any condition. That said, the Deathclaws enjoy living within dark and sheltered areas, and it would be here where they would set up their nests, most likely so they could keep them defended well from anyone that dare try and destroy them. If there was a Deathclaw that found itself on its own, they would go on to claim any territory it could find, most of the time being extremely isolated away from anyone or thing, and create its own nest to build up its numbers again, utilizing nearby things to protect its eggs, such as rocks, bones, twigs, leaves, and anything they could really find. For a good while, this was the society of the Deathclaws. They stuck to themselves, killed their prey to eat, raised their young, and just sought out isolation. However, as the 22nd century came around, one man or new being that would call himself the Master would discover these new creatures out on the wasteland, most likely through his FEV created super mutant force known as Unity, and would desperately try and grab some for his own experiments. With the Master being an incredibly intelligent man, especially after being mutated from the FEV virus, he would be able to genetically manipulate the Deathclaws even further and utilize the FEV to help them become even deadlier and smarter, genetically altering their physiology to appear even more deadly than before. Other individuals now living out within the wasteland within the 22nd century only really heard stories about these creatures known as the Deathclaw, and because of that they became regarded as legendary creatures of destruction, especially out within California. Within the Boneyard, these were some of the earliest wastelanders to discover this new creature, as their whole society would be terrorized by a lone den mother and her offspring who lived between the areas of Downey and Norwalk. Not only that, but they'd have endless standoffs with the gun creating organization known as the Gun Runners, who were desperate to expand their business out into the wasteland, but because of these Deathclaws being present, were unable to move it anywhere. It was completely impossible to get around them. With another Deathclaw spotted at the hub and then more sightings throughout the next few years and decade, the Deathclaw species started to become commonly known throughout all of the wasteland. These beings were almost worshipped to some extent due to their incredible power and ferocity. However, not many people were ever brave enough to get close to a nest or even a rumored location they were within. Because of this, most people just accepted that they were part of this new world and to stay clear of them, because nothing could come from going to see them. That said, this wasn't the case for everyone, as the Enclave saw them once again as an opportunity, and with the Master now being out of the equation within 2161, they saw an opportunity to either start some new experiments on them or to continue on the experiments they might have been doing before the Great War of 2077 had happened. The year was now 2235 and the Enclave had emerged once again after going into hiding after the bombs had fallen. The truth was they were still active and had set up their new headquarters out within an old oil rig off the west coast of America, now under the rule of President Dick Richardson, who had been elected into office in 2220. It was in 2235 where the Enclave would go on to capture as many Deathclaws as they possibly could and would bring them back to their labs to experiment on them, utilizing the FEV, similar to what the Master had been doing years prior. Adding the FEV into their bloodstream only helped genetically modify them even further, and with that, the Deathclaws could now talk to some extent. Deathclaws were already aware of what was right and wrong in the world to some extent, but would not needlessly attack unless they felt threatened. But now with a voice, they could communicate that even further and make it clear if someone was unwelcomed in their society or if they believed they had done wrong and should face the consequences. The problem was they were now under the full control of the Enclave, so that probably didn't matter anymore. Ultimately, with these new mutations and this new ability to communicate, the Enclave hoped that they could finally get the Deathclaws to understand and follow orders without any real question about why they were doing things. However, as mentioned, the Deathclaws knew the difference between right and wrong and immediately started to question the morality of their masters and what their plans were. Despite that, it was relatively a success, and for a good while the Deathclaws served under the Enclave, even if some debated what their motives were. It was on the 17th of May 2242 where the first group of Deathclaws would be sent into battle for the Enclave, as they would order them to storm Vault 13 to mask the true mission of the Enclave, which was to capture any and all Vault dwellers. Despite the success of this mission, many of the Deathclaws realized this was not life for them and completely abandoned the Enclave, remaining in Vault 13 and making it their own little base, run under the leadership of Gruthar. Living here for a bit, they would then come face to face with some humans who had also sought out Vault 13 to live in it for themselves. However, amazingly, the two species came together and agreed to live together, which was fantastic news for the humans, as they were able to be fully protected by these huge beasts that could also communicate with them. That said, the other humans who lived near the vault would hear of this news and would be outraged that the other humans wanted to live with these Deathclaws, and some took action against them. It was here where one man known as Matt took it upon himself to end the Deathclaws once and for all, and ventured into their vault and planted a bomb within their nest. However, the mother Deathclaw named Kirith would spot Matt and saw what he was trying to do and immediately grabbed the bomb, threw it towards the door and covered herself over her eggs to protect them best she could. This was a success, as the bomb only went on to destroy the door and both Kirith and her kin were saved. After this event, the Deathclaws upped their security to make sure none of the other angry humans could make it into their home ever again. This wasn't the only problem these intelligent Deathclaws faced during their time within Vault 13. Since the overthrow of the Overseer from back in the day of 2161, the Vault was now run by a Brotherhood of Steel technology-based computer who would run every single operation, keeping the Vault working. The biggest problem was that to communicate with this computer, it had to all be done through voice commands, which the Deathclaws could actually do. However, the computer was getting on a bit, and now its voice module was malfunctioning. Desperate for a solution, the Deathclaws were given a godsend, as the lone individual that would be only known as the Chosen One would show up in Vault 13 and negotiate with the Deathclaw of Gruthar. The two agreed on a deal. The Chosen One would replace the voice module for them and install the new one as well, if the Deathclaw could help them retrieve a Gek device which they housed down in the Vault's storage area. After this encounter, the Deathclaws lived happily in their fully restored Vault and could continue on their new peaceful path alongside humanity. However, this was not to last long at all, as the Enclave was still furious with them leaving their faction and were on a warpath to shut them down once and for all. Here, an Enclave team led by the special agent super mutant Frank Horrigan stormed the Vault for a second time, massacring every single Deathclaw within, including the humans as well. However, only two members of their society survived, that being Goris, who would accompany the Chosen One on their travels after they fixed the Vault's voice module, and Zahn, who was kept in custody in Navarro, the Enclave's base, under the guard of Dr. Schreber. Apart from that, all other intelligent Deathclaws are now wiped off of the face of the earth, and the only ones left out there are the primitive ones who seek their own space and try to just continue their species for years to come. So to finish off, what makes the Deathclaws so terrifying? Why are they seen as legendary creatures and ones respected by many wastelanders out there? Well, unlike many other predators out there, the Deathclaws are bipedal, and this was made on purpose to allow them to have their heads up at all times to give them a greater field of vision, helping them spot targets and resources from much further out. Their arms are also free to move about as much as possible, allowing them to swipe much wider angles and utilize their massive claws and arms as weapons. This does hinder them a little as their overall speed gets slightly reduced because of it, especially when running after a target. However, they still have 4 limbs and still have their animal-like limbs, meaning that if they really needed to utilize some speed, they would get on all 4s and charge their prey like that. Their skin is so incredibly thick that it forms a type of armor on them, allowing them to be protected from other creatures trying to slice them, and also a lot of gunfire as well. Their gigantic horns also make taking them on with melee weapons almost impossible unless you're absolutely insane, fully kitted out in power armor, and have a melee weapon capable of piercing its skin. If not, you'll be meat within a couple of seconds. But they don't just come in one form. Over the years, they've been experimented on like mad and have also undergone mutations due to their new environments, meaning that whilst you have your regularly fully grown baby and young Deathclaws, including the alphas, you also have legendary Deathclaws, with one being located within the Dead Wind Cavern in the Mojave Wasteland. This one is an alpha male Deathclaw that has survived for so long that it is now 25% larger, with not only its body, but its claws too. There are also blind Deathclaws, which might not seem as deadly, but their hearing is absolutely incredible and can hear someone coming a mile away. And whilst they might be a bit weaker than their regular brothers and sisters, they still hit extremely hard and fast. Albino Deathclaws are some of the fiercest out within the Commonwealth and Appalachia. This is a Deathclaw that has been majorly affected by depigmentation, either due to their location or the FEV. But the FEV is the thing that made them more deadly. They have increased intelligence, they are stronger, and are far more durable than any of the regular Deathclaws. There are also the chameleon Deathclaws, which can blend with its environment. The mythic Deathclaws, which are seen as the second strongest non-legendary in all of the wasteland. The glowing Deathclaws that has been affected by heavy radiation. The terrifying scorched variants of Deathclaws that of course have been affected by the scorch plague that is rampant during these years. The rusted Deathclaws, prime Deathclaws, and finally, the armoured Deathclaws. Because if their thick skin wasn't bad enough, these ones have even more armour to deal with, making a lot of your makeshift weapons totally useless. Ultimately, they are the creatures you want to stay clear of, and luckily they do not really want to pick a fight with anyone. They're smart enough to know that going near human settlements is not going to end well, and it doesn't serve them any purpose ultimately. They're also incredibly sensitive to sound, which plays a big help for human settlements, meaning you can sing, dance, and play music to your heart's content from within your sheltered walls, and the Deathclaws will actively want to move away from your area. They don't want to live next to all of that, and honestly, I don't blame them. This is pretty much why the Deathclaws moved to Quarry Junction in the year of 2281. Before they moved in, NCR troopers were stationed here to extract as many minerals as possible for their operations. However, members of the Powder Gangers over at the NCR Correctional Facility had broken out and had stolen the workers' supply of dynamite that they were using to blast open rocks. With no dynamite explosions happening anymore, the Deathclaws saw this area as a perfect location for them. Many workers believe the lack of explosive sounds here is exactly why they moved in and took over the entire quarry, making it a death trap for anyone mindlessly venturing from Goodsprings to New Vegas. With this all said, if you are powerful enough with tons of weapons and ammunition, Deathclaws can be taken down and can be removed from an area once and for all, but it would take an extremely brave individual or group to do so, as even Brotherhood of Steel groups struggle to take one out. But if someone were able to shut one down, the rewards would be great. You can sell their things for quite a good amount of caps, and the best part of it all is their eggs make really amazing omelets that you can make and sell or just eat for yourself to prepare for the next slaughter of Deathclaws. With that said, this has been the lore behind these fearsome beasts, from their origins, their evolution, their relationships with humanity, as well as all of the different types out there within the wasteland. I want to say a major thank you for watching this video, and let me know your experience when you first encountered the Deathclaw. Was it in the originals? Was it in Fallout 3 or 4? Or was it like many people at Quarry Junction, realizing very quickly you had gone the completely wrong way and were in immediate danger? I also want to say a big thanks to my patrons for supporting the channel and for allowing me to really make the content I want to make, including my small fishes, my big fishes, This Mind of Mine and Anthony Bonfiglio, my YouTube channel Wise Ones, Sith Lord 906, Video Gamer 75, Kosh 1516, Planet Nanontarium, and V3XXE, my Shark Dan F, and my Megalodon Sinus and Hazy Thoughts. That is all for now though. Thank you for watching again, and I shall see you all in the next one. Cheers.